One of the case studies that we discussed in this week's episode is a company that produces solar jet fuel. Personally, I find flying extremely problematic, primarily because of the emissions involved. And as somebody that loves to travel, the idea of environmentally responsible jet fuel is extremely appealing. However, all the data that I've found concerning so called sustainable aviation fuels address production and not use, which is very concerning. If you're interested in learning more about sustainable aviation fuel, there are links in the description. And if you have any information about emissions, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with us. Thanks very much for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Communicating Earth podcast by Climate Acceptance Studios, the podcast by and for climate and nature communicators. Today, I've got the distinct pleasure of speaking with Lucia, who has a very unusual background. Would you define yourself as an activist, a campaigner, an environmentalist, or a dancer?
um, I guess, okay, I'll have to take the dancer because it's simply true. And then none of the others, though. I'd have to say communicator. I don't know.
None of them.
Is that a word? Does that work?
Yes,
I would
that's
say
a great one.
communicator.
Interesting. And so tell me a little bit more about your role and what you do to
Right.
qualify you as a dancer and a communicator.
Right. So I'm a flamenco dancer. That's why, because I love it. I need it. I'll always be that. I'm also a climate tech communicator because, well, I guess I started out with the dancing. But when I realized that with the dancing, I have a really wonderful impact on the people in the moment. You know, you feel the joy, you feel the pleasure. There's literally people coming up to me saying, "Oh my God, I've never danced in my life." That's great. But I also want to have a longer term impact where I can say, wow, I've really contributed to the direction the world is going in. So now I'm strategic director in a climate tech communications agency that's called LifeSize. And I haven't got any formal communications qualifications. I learned on the job. I really believe in that. In theater, in dance, you do a lot of that as well. Of course, you have professional training, but it's all about writing, isn't it? And speaking. So you can learn it all on the job if you're interested, fired up by it. My journey into LifeSize was indeed very unconventional. Somebody introduced me to Alyssa, the founder at the time, and said, "Do you have a job for her?" And she said, "What are her qualifications?" "Dancing." She said, "No." And then somebody said, "Well, she also speaks German." And Alyssa said, "Okay," because at the time, LifeSize was just opening its German office. So this was, well, actually it was, I think, something like on the day of Brexit or the day after Brexit. And we're a UK-based business. So it meant a lot to us at the time to actually have a European entity because we work with European climate tech companies. So it meant a lot. And purely from my perspective, it was very, very fortunate because I got the job. And I just did things like, this is a long time ago, right? Pre-Google Translate, pre-AI telling you how to write an email and what to do about things. So I helped with, what is the Finanzamt, the financial authority, trying to say in this letter? What do we need to do? And then somebody said, "Okay, could you proofread this press release?" And I did. And I did the job. I guess a nice word to say is, I think, meticulously. Or others might say fastidiously. I always have 2 cents to add to stuff. So I gave my opinion, and I think that helped me learn on the job, learn what works in a press release, what doesn't. And then I kind of worked through all the kinds of projects and retainers that we do at LifeSize. So I've worked in PR, in journalist relations. I've also worked on brand projects, on developing a website from scratch. So I've seen all the different facets of what a climate tech company needs to do to communicate about its technology and to be adopted through my work at LifeSize. And now I'm strategic director, communicator.
What a great background. What a great breadth of backgrounds. As I'm sure you know, this podcast is about the theory that action inspires action. And I think you mentioned that you've got maybe a couple examples of things that you've worked on that were potentially really good examples for us to know about.
I fully agree with the statement, by the way. I think we lead by example by doing, walking the talk and all that. Examples of work. So, I mean, cheesy one, but I think that every single one of our clients could work as a great example. They really do transform things, and the way our communications, I'd like to think, does help them make that transformation happen, right? I'm thinking of Orcan Energy, which uses waste heat to turn that into electricity. So industrial waste heat that would otherwise just heat up the local area. Sorry, could
Yeah,
I?
on the face of it, it's not the most compelling
No, it's not.
narrative story, is it? I mean, fascinating, wonderful, brilliant
Um,
technology, but how do you find the story in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of climate tech on the face of it isn't so immediately, obviously sexy as some people like to have, like, or some
Mm,
VCs might like it to be. A lot of climate tech is just making dirty things better, making
mm,
inefficient things more efficient. That's all it is. And yet that is what's really going to lead to sustainable, healthy economies, right?
mm,
We
mm,
need some technologies that are really like, wow, groundbreaking. This is insane. And we need that. I mean, we did work with Climeworks who are hoovering carbon out of the air. Oh,
mm.
crazy. Direct air capture, that's called. And then, yeah, we're working with companies like Orcan Energy who are just taking that waste heat, which is so bad, and turning it into electricity. And we know we need a lot more of that as we're electrifying industries, transportation, etc. But I think a good example that is accessible and challenging at the same time would be Kempower. Kempower is a Finnish company, I was just about to say a small Finnish company, not small anymore. When we started working with them, they were around 40 people on a team, 40. They are now several hundred. When we started working with them, they had one marketing person. That team is now 40 people. So they've scaled really, really fast. And what they do is they develop fast chargers and the necessary software for cars, for lorries, and they've now spread across the world. Why am I saying all this? Because it's a really good example of climate tech, right? It's
Mm,
kind of obvious and simple now. It wasn't then. Another good example would be Synhelion. That's a Swiss company.
Well, wait, to go back
Oh,
to
yeah.
that first example, what role did communications play in that growth, do you think?
All the role. I'm going to pick out 2 points. Kempower is the most friendly, vision-driven, impactful team that I have ever met. I've just said they grew from 40 people to, I think, 600, 700 at the moment. That's a lot of people. And now I haven't worked with every single one of them, but I've worked with the entire marketing team. I've been in technical briefings, engineering briefings with engineers, with accounts managers, sales managers. Every single one of them is friendly, capable, and ambitious. That doesn't happen without communications. You need to project the kind of company that you are through your communications to then attract that kind of talent. And the reason why that is so incredibly important, because I mean, it's easy to say that now that they have grown, but as we all know, a lot of startups struggle to grow, don't grow. And one of the key things that they need to achieve is to hire a team that pushes, that drives, right? That
Of
marries
course.
incredible technical know-how in an area that is only now developing, that is being built as we speak, that is vision-driven, that wants to save the planet, the climate, whatever you want to call it, and that wants to also live in this very difficult environment of startup life. It can be really challenging. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You don't know what next year is going to bring. It's not the same as a normal career in that regard. So uniting all that and finding those people and growing together, it's actually a very big challenge for a lot of companies. For Kempower, it feels like it's easy for them. So I think communications definitely contributed to that.
That's so funny. That is not at all what I was expecting you to say. I was expecting you to say that, as much as communications played a role, it was in bringing awareness of the brand and helping, grow the identity for a wider audience, not to actually grow the company itself. I mean, that's a fascinating use of communications.
All of the other stuff is, of course, also true.
Mm,
It's a lot of trade PR, so a lot of
mm,
getting to know the media landscape, the trade publications in each geography, which is
mm,
plenty. It is writing effectively about that. It is translating. Often the tech USPs, the USPs will be in the technology somewhere deep inside. That's not necessarily what you want to put in the headline, right? So translating that into things that the operations managers of, I don't know, fleets, ports, harbors, bus depots need to hear. That is some of the work that we do. And then I'm going to say the word churning out, even though I don't like that, but churning out a lot of good writing, on time, punctual, that is also part of communications, right? And that needs to also happen regularly, permanently, at scale, growing. And I think, especially with Kempower, they've grown across several continents. So they started in Finland, then Europe, and then North America, Asia, Australia, Africa. Learning to communicate with the different people in all these different continents, that's also a challenge. So yes,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, what were the biggest challenges that you faced across all these strategies? Was the speed of
gonna
the
be a
growth
weird answer.
itself?
I'd say that with Kempower, you don't face that many challenges because the messaging at the beginning, I mean, of course you do, but at the beginning, the messaging, they got that right. Their brand is so strong. And the way they marry the big vision and do not shy away from it, even in our current geopolitical times, which I absolutely love about them, is great. And the way they also speak technology, engineering language is great. I'm going to say that's to do with them being Finnish. I don't know if you've ever worked with Finnish people. They're
I've not.
really, I mean, they're a wonderful people. Really, really great. Always humble. And then the ones that we meet, very ambitious. That's a wonderful mixture in a person, you know? It's really, really nice to work with. I'm going to use another example to speak more about what can be challenging about climate tech communications, because with Kempower, it's a special case where we're now in a phase in which it's just rolling. And
But was that initial growth? I mean, was that an obstacle, just the speed at which it was growing and keeping up?
yeah, it was. Do you need to know more? Yes, it was.
Moving on.
No, and this is why I wanted to talk about the team and the hiring first, because I think that's their secret. I think that's what they're getting right. And I think, why is that happening? Because the founder, that's what he got right. Tommy Ristimäki and his original founding team, that's what they set up. And they set up a culture, so therefore it can expand, right? Because everyone that they hired got that. Now that the hiring is obviously done by more people than the founder, and in fact, they have a new CEO as of last year. Now, because they hired so extremely well, that is now working. So that's why the usual challenges that we face with other climate technologies don't apply in the same way for Kempower, interestingly. Usually what we see is that the growth doesn't happen quite so fast. And that's, of course, also because Kempower is in an industry that is relatively mature, in a climate industry that's relatively mature, charging vehicles with electricity. Another example that is completely different and maybe more illustrative of lots of climate tech companies is Synhelion. So they're a Swiss company and they produce solar fuels. So it's the same fuel that, fossil fuel that you put into an airplane, car, boat, ship, whatever, but it's made with solar irradiation. It's crazy. If you look them up, have a look. Like, they have giant mirrors that focus the energy. It's fascinating. Now, their advantage is that the aviation industry, as of recently, things can of course change, is desperate for a solution because they want to decarbonize, and it's actually really difficult in the aviation space because you need high energy density fuels, and there's not that much of that. And you need to obviously be lightweight. You don't want to have to change infrastructure completely. Batteries at that size would be too heavy. So finding a fuel that works is difficult. There are, of course, things like bioethanol. All those are good, probably bridging solutions. But we need something that's completely different. One of those like, let's rethink how we make this technologies. And with Synhelion, when we started working with them, the challenge was boiling down a very complex technology and chemistry. That's really what it is. Like, the mirror fields are complex. The chemistry is complex. Everything about it is very, very complex and probably too hard to understand, and also just not that relevant. And certainly an aviation company doesn't really need to know, right? What do they want to know? They want to know if it works. Can I have fuel? How much is it going to cost? Where do I get it from? So translating the big vision and that difficult, complex technology into messages that those companies and investors could believe in and get behind, that was the challenge. And I think that's something that a lot of climate tech companies face. And having to communicate that it is going to take a long time and that effort is worth it, that you need to invest at the early stage, at the medium stage, at the scaling stage, at all those stages, that is hard, right? That's not something that we can all get behind. Do you want to invest in a solution you can get tomorrow? Yay! Do you want to invest one that is probably going to work in 15 years or in 20 years and is then going to transform economies and how we live and how we do things? It's harder, right? Like getting behind that is hard. It's not easy. That's a challenge. That was your
And
question.
what were the stakes for this? I mean, if the communications hadn't worked, if it had gotten wrong, what wouldn't have happened?
Well, I mean, I take my job very seriously, and I think that's important when you're in climate communications. If we don't get the communications right, the technologies aren't going to be invested in. They're not going to be bought by customers. We're not transforming our industries. We're not transforming how we do things on our planet. We're not stopping the climate crisis from completely unfolding. We won't have sustainable economies. I mean, I'm not going to paint this whole picture of, and the world is going to burn, but it is. I mean, it's so horrible. And yeah, I genuinely think there's a lot we need to recreate and come back to a healthier planet. Climate technologies to some may seem like, oh, well, you're just doing incremental change and stuff. Yes, but we really need that because these industries aren't going away. It's nice to think, oh, we need to ditch the first class and then we could save so and so much fuel. Well, are we going to ditch the first class? I'm thinking in the aviation industry. I read that last week. It's nice to think, oh, well, we'll use less of something. Are we? Who's going to do that? And I really don't mean this in a blaming kind of way, but what will you reduce? What will I reduce? What are countries, economies, finance ministers looking at their gross domestic product? What are they going to reduce? What are they going to switch off factories? Are they going to say, okay, let's produce less food? What are we going to switch off? I'm making it dramatic, but I think that is the scale that we're working at, right? Yeah. So what are the stakes if climate technology doesn't get invested in, doesn't get deployed by factories, plants, supply chains, whatever, then we're just not going to reach any kind of climate goals. And that is how I feel like when I sit down with my clients and we start working out how to communicate, I go back to that. Like if they say, oh, could we say it like that? And I don't firmly believe that that is going to work. Then I say, actually, no, it's not going to work. We need to say it this way so that you sell that product or that service. Often it's a service, something as a service. It is that important, right? Because we want to see traction. When I started, we had the 2030 goals. Those have largely silently disappeared. So now we're focused, on 2040, 2050, 2035. We need to achieve some of that. So that's the stakes. Sorry, very long answer, but that's what I'm.
No, it's a fantastic answer. I mean, the example of the airline fuel is something that's particularly of interest to me because when I found out what airplanes were doing, I stopped flying. I started having nightmares about being on planes. And this is after spending, most of my life flying a lot. I mean, I lived in Singapore for a while and, for the weekend, you'd go to Bangkok. It would cost nothing. It was like a bus trip, to get on a plane. So I went through this very sharp, very uncomfortable transition of just being like, oh my God, what have I been doing my entire life? And I've got family over both seas, and it's a very difficult decision to be, right? Do I do something that I feel I can't ethically do, or see my parents.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
So how are we going to handle that? People are, I mean, reducing our, weekend breaks possible?
mm,
Is everybody going to do it? Are enough people going to do that?
well,
The
exactly. I
statistics
mean, I've
forecasts
I've
say
I've
no.
got I've got the luxury of a job where
Mm,
I'm able to build in that extra day or two of travel and spend
nice.
a little bit more money to travel overland. But yeah, I mean, if they can find a solution to airline fuel, I'm gonna be one of the first people jumping for joy because that's the biggest negative influence that climate change has had on my life.
And that's why solar fuels are a really good example, because it touches business very much so, which all climate
Mm,
tech does. And we, as normal people, can relate, because we also want to fly. Most climate
mm,
tech, that connection to us, to the B2C, the B2B to B2C, is not as obvious or not as direct. And it's always
mm,
there though, right? Every product that we use, everything we have here at home was manufactured in a factory somewhere, was
mm,
shipped around the world, was driven here by a
mm,
lorry, was delivered by a car, whatever it is, right? So
mm,
everything that we have, that we live with, that we do, that we use, that we watch, that we see, everything is
mm,
influenced by climate tech. It's just the
mm.
connection isn't always quite as um,
Direct, I guess,
direct
or
as with
immediate.
solar
Yeah.
fuels or as with fuels. Yeah.
I cannot wait to hear more from you about how you tackle that problem, because that is, I think, one of the trickiest things that we face as well. Is we do often work with people that have this amazing research. I mean, just groundbreaking, world-changing research buried in a PDF. And how do you, for people, and we do trainings, and I had a slide in the training that was saying, when you hook somebody, you've got 10 seconds.
Yes,
That's
I
now
know.
wrong. It's 3 seconds. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
know.
going down. And the point is, if you've got like several hundred pages of really amazing PDF, how in 3
How
seconds,
are you going
how
to
do
do
you
that?
engage?
That
So
is
I'm
what we
I'm
do
gonna
at Life Size.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you in detail about that in a second, but first I'm gonna
Mm.
jump into the quick fire round if you're ready for it.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm trying to be.
Okay, very good. First word that comes to mind when I say climate.
Action.
Who is your greatest inspiration in climate and nature communications?
David Attenborough and Nina Hayula.
Who's someone's work that you think should receive more attention than it does?
Ah, probably does receive a lot of attention, but should receive even more. Chris Wedding's Climate CEO newsletter. Chris
Hmm.
Wedding, I think he's called. Climate CEO. I think if you Google that, you find it.
Favorite book, TV, movie show that has to do with environmentalism, climate, or nature?
I don't know if okay, one word answer. How to Feed the World. It's a book. I've just read it. So it's not my favorite,
That's
but it's
more
my
than
most
one
recent.
word.
How to Feed the World.
Do you have a favorite communications channel?
In person. Does that count?
It does. It does. It's a very popular answer, actually. I think that's mine too.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite stat or fact?
No stat. Fact. People are very complicated, often irrational
Mm,
animals. That's just how it is. We need to deal with that reality, not think it's different.
mm, that is a fantastic answer. What's one climate myth or misconception that you wish we could permanently retire?
Uh, some people think that we need to sort out social justice issues first
Hmm,
and then climate.
hmm,
I've actually had a conversation with a friend who, on a very local level, elections were coming up in Berlin, and she
hmm,
said she's not going to vote Green. She's going to vote another party because of that.
hmm,
And, I'm not judging whatever choices she's making, but
hmm,
that idea that those are two separate things, I think I'd love to retire that, because I think once we handle a lot
hmm,
of climate issues, all the social is going to be a lot easier because they're that
hmm,
connected.
hmm. And
Yeah.
do you have a number one source for climate information?
I read the Bloomberg Green newsletter regularly,
Okay.
every day. I find it good, long form, deeper, global perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And final question, do you have a go-to analogy or metaphor that you use when you're trying to explain the climate crisis?
I don't think I do. But if I
It's
had to explain, no one ever asks you
yeah,
that, right? Because nobody wants to be preached to. But if I had to,
yeah,
I would, the plastic crisis, I know not quite the same as climate, but very
mm,
related or connected. Um, when I was, 6 years old or so, we went to the zoo. And they
mm,
had near the aquarium part or the penguins part, which obviously is really great when you're 6 years old, but still great. They had a picture of a whale that had passed somewhere in the world, I don't remember.
mm,
And
mm,
they'd opened the big, big mouth and it was full of rubbish. It was really horrific, like horrible.
yeah,
This is, you know, 30, 35 years ago, long, long, long before Blue Planet by David Attenborough came out, before the
mm,
plastic
mm,
crisis was something that everybody knew about. I knew about it then, and I think this kind of image of this beautiful animal full of rubbish
mm,
that's ours, that we dropped accidentally,
mm,
and whatever happened to it, right? As a child, it made it pretty obvious that we should do something about it. I mean, for me at the time, they also just introduced recycling in my municipality, which I was very on board with, like
mm,
yellow bin,
mm,
blue bin, brown bin. That was very exciting. We all got on board
mm,
with that in school. Um, the connection was obvious that we shouldn't make our environment dirty, that we
mm.
want our animals to be well, that we can do fun things like putting it in the right bin. That all just worked. So if I was asked to explain the climate crisis, I would use these kinds of very actual examples.
I
Like,
mean,
at least
what,
this isn't happening far, far, far away, right? We do see the signs everywhere in the local
mm.
news and stuff. So I would connect that.
I mean, obviously it's a great example because we're still talking about it. So
I
that's,
it stuck
yeah,
with me 100%.
mm,
It's I still know the image. I mean, obviously, from a psychological perspective, I might have recreated that image many times and whatever. But
mm,
this idea that our rubbish is in an animal's mouth, in that big animal's mouth, not just one bit. It was like full. It looked like a rubbish pit. It was horrific.
mm,
And the other day, I spoke to a founder of a company here in London. Last week, this was. And she told me she'd been sailing in the some sea somewhere far away. I don't remember.
mm.
And she said you could actually see the debris, the plastic floating on the ocean surface.
Yeah,
I'm not a sailor, so that's not something I would be familiar with at all. But the fact that you could, like, just like you can see here on the Thames or the Regent's Canal, you can see rubbish here and it's horrible, but you
mm,
think, well, it's right next to where people have dropped stuff.
yeah,
How out on the
yeah.
big wide sea? That's crazy. That's horrible. Um,
Well, and now it's everywhere, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
even plastic pollution in the poles, the most remote parts of the planet.
I guess
But
hearing it from an individual person and their personal story, their sailing trip, makes it more like real.
it,
Whereas if I hear it in statistics on the news, I don't know, it's less close. It feels less close.
exactly so. So I mean is that how you solve that problem by individual storytelling? The problem of trying to communicate complex, not directly relevant science to what audience exactly? Would this be yeah, to what audience exactly were you trying to communicate this to?
Well, that's a difficult question. I mean, my
Mm,
clients at Life Size, we always communicate to B2B, business to business customers, to
mm,
investors,
mm,
and to journalists. So we don't ever usually have an official remit of B2C communications as such.
mm,
Um, having said that, I think that all of these people, all of the above stakeholder groups, are also actual normal people, right?
mm,
So while they need to hear, the lowest cost of whatever material or fuel it is that they want to source, that while they need to hear how easy it is to incorporate this into their everyday operations and whatever, they are also human beings that will respond to similar stories.
mm,
So I don't think B2B communications should be hyper emotional, headline, plastic in the whale's mouth.
Sure.
But it shouldn't either not talk about that. I
Yeah.
actually think that the care for the climate, for our planet, is as dead as, geopolitics and the investment landscape partly want to make us believe. I actually think that I always go on about operations managers because so often they are the key into a company, right? I think a lot of them do actually care. A lot of them have children, grandchildren that care. They are human beings. They are also operations managers. They are also looking at the bottom line. They are also looking at all these things. That's why, like when we do, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but when we devise, construct, craft messaging, so in marketing, the messaging house or the key messages, whatever you want to call it, the first thing a company says about itself to the public, we go with technical messages, operational messages, vision impact messages, and commercial messages. And we choose a few, 2, 3 for each, and then we mix and match them depending on what the story is.
Okay.
It is
there a
rare.
hierarchy? Is there a
Is there a
hierarchy?
hierarchy? Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the challenge. And that's why companies come to us, because determining that hierarchy, I think there's a inverse relationship where the better you know your technology and your company, the harder it is for you to know what you need to say first. So this outsiders know things better in that regard is really, really important for our teams that we work with. So they give us everything there is to know, and we marry that up with what we know about the industries they need to convince, work in, investors, and help them decide what those most important things are. And I mean, my rule of thumb or my guide for this is, what is the single most important thing we need to say for them to say, okay, I want to hear your next sentence. And then what is that next sentence? And then what's the next one, right? Because you literally, even in networking or whatever, you can't say it all at once, everything there is to say about you, or in dating or whatever analogy you want to use. So what's that first sentence? What's the next one? And I'm going to use the word to discipline yourself to do that, because it works. Not for the sake of it, but because that's the only way it's going to work. I mean, it's physics, right? You can't say it all at once. So you're going to have to say something first. So you might as well spend a lot of strategic time deciding what that is to up your chances, because you're already up against a lot, right? Like changing industries and economies is not easy. So you might as well spend that, 6 to 8 weeks to figure out what that sentence should be.
When you were talking initially about having the two different communications channels of B2B and journalism, I was thinking these sound like completely opposite messaging points, probably messengers. But then the more I hear you talk about it, and I agree, or I strongly believe that the messenger is often as important, sometimes even more important than the message itself. It sounds like you're actually finding ways to use the same messengers and tell very much the same messages, with maybe just shifting the hierarchy a little bit. Is that your strategy for?
That is it. Sometimes clients come to us and say, oh, we have a very diverse range of stakeholders. We need to speak to 10 different industries and to journalists, and within journalists to, business and startup and trade. And we need to speak to infrastructure investors and to VCs and to, and it just feels like, oh, how we ever got to do that? Because that's so many and it's really, really hard. And it actually is possible. But this is where this reverse thing comes in. I think the better you know your company, the harder it is to see that. I mean, they see the bigger picture in terms of the impact that they're going to have, but seeing the bigger picture of, okay, it is actually easier than you think. Well, and also harder than you think at the same time. I think that's why you do need an agency or a CMO who understands your industry, who knows the particular challenges of startup life, and who understands technology as well. I think that's what you need. Somebody who gets technology. You don't, none of us at Life Size is like Actually, are we scientists? Maybe someone has a science degree, I'm not sure. But that's not
By proxy,
primarily
right?
what we are, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I said after all the work that you've done, you must be scientists by proxy by now.
Well, interesting, because
Mm,
yes and no, because I actually think it's good that there's some things we don't deeply know. Like we know,
mm,
but not deeply, because I think you need to have this outside perspective of not having understood everything so that you can
mm,
still relate to, um, well, to industry professionals who also don't get all of that, so that you can build that
mm.
bridge between the deep technical knowledge and the actually completely different interest in what it
Right.
is, right? Like to develop climate technology, you need to be crazy deep in it. But to
Mm,
adopt it, you don't necessarily. It's different points that interest you. So it's building that bridge. And I think our level of knowledge is exactly right. Well, that's what I think.
mm,
Our level of knowledge, what journalists know, what they write about, what they care for, what gets a story approved by editors, etc. That
mm.
having that broad overview across the European, partly North American landscape, that's what helps find the right messages
Okay.
and being able to relate to to the business side of things, to
Yeah.
what concerns an operations manager, an operations professional.
So when you're looking at your strategy retrospectively, how do you measure impact? What does that look like?
Mm. Um, I'm going to say there's the obvious ones that, I mean, we don't measure this, but our clients will. So CO2 emissions avoided or pollution avoided,
Mm,
things like that,
mm,
um, which I guess is the essential thing.
mm,
Then we'll be looking at things like coverage. Um, we're also looking at things like the depth of interest from a journalist. So this morning I had a call with a journalist at the German Handelsblatt. It's a
mm,
business finance publication. And the questions that she asked me about this company. So this is a stealth startup in robotics and agriculture
mm,
that we're going to launch into the market soon this spring. And the questions that she asked were really, really interesting. So while that isn't
mm.
really a KPI, it shows me what we need to do with our messaging and that what we have already done is
Mm.
working, right? So it's a very
Okay.
qualitative assessment, but very important, right? What questions are you getting back? You'll always get questions back. Something that I often say to founders is, say, for example, when they pitch, we also work with them on their pitch deck for raising investment.
Mm,
If they'll always get questions, obviously, because in a 3-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute pitch, you can never say everything there is to say to make a funding
mm,
decision, right?
mm,
Um, but if the question is, I didn't really get what the thing is, could you tell me that again? It makes the
mm.
conversation difficult, right? So
Yeah.
what are you going to leave out? If the question is, okay, now tell me more. What are those first letters of intent? Who are these companies? That's a good
Mm.
question. That's a question that no investor/human being is embarrassed to ask. But going up to
Okay.
someone being like, huh, is not so comfortable, right? So so measuring the quality of questions you get and what those questions are, I think that's actually a really
Uh,
interesting KPI, for want of a
so
better
so
word.
much more about getting people to ask the right questions as opposed to trying to answer their questions in advance.
Because you can't, right? This is what I
Mm,
mean. Like you want to have this ambition of everybody, the whole wide world understands us and gets behind us. And that is a wonderful ambition to have, but it's also just not realistic.
mm,
Right now, what is it really that you need to achieve? Your next commercial milestone, right? Like as a
mm,
startup, you might be
mm,
6 people, you might already be 25 or 40. There's still everything to play for on the positive side, but
mm,
also everything to lose on the negative side. So it's really important to have that big goal, absolutely, and to have a team on site that wants that with you, on your side, that wants that with you. But also you need to be very like, okay, and realistically, what is it that we need to achieve in 3 months, in 6 months? And
mm,
what communications do we therefore need to do to achieve that? And then some. I think it
mm,
doesn't contradict itself, because whatever you're going to be doing now, if it's founded in those key messages that are true about your
mm,
company, then you'll always be able to build for the next commercial goal, for the bigger thing, and then you will achieve your big vision. It's just if you aim for the big vision first, without that reality check, then then you'll
mm,
miss the big vision. It's
mm.
it's it's being realistic with your resources, your time, your time, mostly your money, of course, goes without saying, I suppose, but it's a very
How
real
much
factor, isn't it?
how much do you think the communications landscape is changing? I mean, do you have to kind of strategize for strategy changing over time? How do you see the future of communications? What does that look like?
I want to give a really inspiring answer, but
Yes,
I
please.
think, but I think it's not going to change that much in our particular space,
Mm,
um, because industries change slow, sales cycles are slow.
mm,
People in all of these industries, um, energy, manufacturing, are staying in their roles for a long time still.
mm,
So the the simple truth of you need to speak their language
mm,
and deliver, that's not really going to change. It may well
mm,
change,
mm,
whether you do that on LinkedIn or which publication you go to first, but those are kind of down the line. The basic truth of you need to, I know I'm harping on about it, but I really do believe
mm,
that you need to get your message right, and you need to translate and marry up and bring together your big vision authentically with the reality. That's not
mm.
going to change, I don't think.
I mean, that's the thing that we're finding as well is, there's all the new developments with AI, and it feels like it's almost a full-time job just to keep on top of technically what's changing. But on the other side of that, we use the same structure to tell stories, the three-act structure that we've been using at least since Aristotle's Poetics for 2,000 years. So I doubt that's
Exactly.
going to change in the next few years.
This is exactly what I mean. That
Mm,
us humans, we're not changing. I mean, this is so cheesy, but it's also true.
mm,
Us humans, the fact that we're complex animals with intelligence and stuff, that's not changing. Of
mm,
course, the way we are, what we consume, and AI and all that is changing, but these basics don't change. The fact that,
mm,
I mean, this is getting really cheesy, but the fact that an operations manager is, I'm saying he because often they are men,
mm,
is a dad, is a granddad, has a kind of pride in their job, doesn't want to be told the way you've done your job for 40 years is terrible
mm,
and your industry is killing the planet. That's not a nice
mm,
message to hear, right? Like, chances are that that individual isn't a bad person.
mm,
Chances are that maybe they've made mistakes. Maybe they should have looked into sustainability 10 years ago. Yeah, but do you want to hear that?
mm,
When you had made your realization about flying,
mm,
well, it's not going to help anyone if you feel really guilty and horrible about it. Then what are
mm,
you going to do?
mm,
Point is, are you going to change something now? Can you? Can you convince your team, your colleagues,
mm,
your boss, your that other department head who's a bit and you've got an odd relationship? That's the reality of life, right?
mm,
So,
mm,
speaking to this operations manager, like that human being that he is, flawed, good, wonderful as all human beings are, I think that's really
mm,
important, and that's not going to change. Um, and that's something that we don't see enough of, maybe.
mm. I mean, that's another point that we're constantly driving home is that, those doom narratives don't work. Telling
Mm.
somebody they're doing something wrong or have done something bad doesn't work. But as soon as you say, what you're doing right now has negative consequences, but if you do this, then what you're doing could have fantastically
Yeah.
optimistic, great consequences for everybody. And so it's not saying bad news doesn't exist, but it's putting it in the context of, yes, this isn't great, but we can use this as a learning experience to actually create something that's much better than what we had before. I'm glad to hear that you're using that in a context that's not a traditionally narrative driven field, I'd
No,
say.
and good point, but it should be. That's really what I think. I think we have
Uh,
this opportunity, right? Okay, so as a planet, we're in a crisis situation. It means we have an opportunity to change not just our industries and technologies and
mm,
whatever, but also how we speak to each other, how we build businesses.
mm,
Every startup founder has this, because they are, I'm going to say different, um, you know, crazy ambitious with ideas that are What?
Yeah.
They also have this opportunity of bringing that change about in a different way. And this is why,
Mm,
again, why I
mm,
speak about someone like Tommy Ristimeki from Kempower. You know, what he didn't just build a new technology and change how we fuel vehicles. He also
mm,
built a new way of how to run a successful global business. Like
mm,
and it is that profound. And every startup has that opportunity. Obviously, established companies also have this opportunity to change, right? And I believe in
mm,
that. And I
mm,
want to believe in that because I want to be hopeful. You have to be. Um, but startups have a unique opportunity. And I love working with them because of that reason, because we,
yeah,
as the small boutique agency that we are, that's what we want for ourselves as well, for our small team, right? For every
mm,
individual that I work with. I want us to try out new ways of working together. And we've got that opportunity
mm.
to do that.
So is there any singular piece of advice that you've received over the years that's been absolutely more valuable than any other, or any piece of advice? Maybe there's two questions that you've learned that you would like to pass on to everybody that you think is globally applicable.
All right. I have both. The
Okay.
best piece of advice that I've been given, I've never actually realized that that's, yeah, but
Mm,
it was profound. Our founder, Alyssa, um,
mm,
she used to say, speak the subtext, by which she meant that if you're in a room, nowadays virtually, back then actual rooms, with people and you sense this something, this like, "Meh," you know, something's
mm,
not progressing, unlocking, breaking through. The conversation is on some level where we're not pushing forward, we're not breaking through something.
mm,
Address it, say it in a
mm,
friendly and direct way. And this is again where this how we work with each other is so important. I think this applies to all sectors, industries, whatever. And of course, especially to wanting to change the world. Being
mm,
really open and honest and I dare I say vulnerable with each other is necessary
mm,
because we are trying to profoundly change the world. Chances are that there'll be times when we feel like we're failing, like we're not doing a good enough job, like it's all going to be dreadful, like we want to be better
mm,
individually as a company, whatever. All those
mm,
things are true. And if we keep them kind of bottled up under the surface, we're not going to make the progress we need to make. So yeah, speak the subtext. I think what it really just means is being open and honest with each other. But too many business environments aren't open and honest with each other. And that's why you get this kind of like awkward, like nothing gets
mm.
done, nothing moves forward. And it's like, let's just face the facts that sometimes things aren't great. And now what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Um, so that's Alyssa's advice. And my advice, uh,
Can I just jump in and give
yeah.
one example of that? That we recently had a guest on the podcast who's a phenomenal speaker with a really, really interesting history. And we were about to record and then suddenly discovered that within that history was working for a company that had done a lot of PR around fossil fuel companies. Well, this is
Shame
somebody
on
we
that.
well, this is somebody we really wanted to talk to, and had done some really, really phenomenal things, some really important
Mhm.
things in climate communications since then. And the initial knee-jerk reaction was, "Oh my God, we can't feature this person on the podcast. We can't do this." And my first reaction was, "This is a brilliant, like, this is such a good story. This is somebody that's obviously been through a really, really interesting journey." And to be brutally honest, Tom and I have been through that same journey as well. I've had the great misfortune of making videos for Shell in some of my darkest hours. And so it's, you know, to bring that story out, it could have been its own episode, I think, just by itself, just talking about, all the things that were learned by going through that journey and how it happened and how we can make it happen for other people and how actually instead of something that you should necessarily be ashamed with, it's actually kind of a benefit because now we know how they work. We've seen behind the curtain. I'm not proud of it. I didn't enjoy it. It was horrible, but it's a very, very valuable perspective, I think, to bring to it.
I think it's something that actually, I mean, I'm making this really big, but
Mm,
as all of humanity and as individual people, we don't have many ways to get out of shameful things. Like, I mean, I think the Christian religion has some roots out of there, but if that's not your thing, like, how do you deal with the shame that you feel about whatever it is, whether that is on a career level or on something else? And I think we can help each other by knowing that we all make mistakes. This is what I mean. We're flawed, and that's okay. That's
Exactly
just how
so.
it is. So I obviously said that as a joke, shame on that person, because because I really think it's completely normal that we do stuff. What do we know? We get out in the world, we go through school, we have our parenting, we meet the people we meet. We just live life. We try our best at any given point, right? That doesn't mean it's always perfect. What's perfect anyway? I find this really important, and I love the climate space and the sustainability space, but too often I think we're under too much pressure to be perfect, to
Well,
not
and
eat any avocados.
if we deny ourselves the ability to change, then why are we doing this? Because
Exactly.
we're denying the people that are doing the wrong thing the ability to change. So then why are we trying to change them?
Exactly.
But I interrupted your second point. You were going to go on to say the piece of advice that you wanted to pass
uh,
on.
yeah. So every time a new team member joins Life-Size, I think in the initial hello meeting, Lucia meeting, I say that there are stupid questions and that you should ask them. And I think this is really important for all of us working in climate, because too often there are complexities and things where we worry, oh, should I be understanding this? Should I have understood this political implication, this regulation, how this technology works, the history of X, whatever it all is, so many different things. And by X, I didn't mean Twitter, I meant of something. Just making that clear. There are so many things that we might not understand that we feel like we should understand. And then we think it's a stupid question, and therefore we don't ask it. I know everyone says there are no stupid questions, but we still think they are stupid, so we don't ask it. Therefore, I like to tell my colleagues, there are stupid ones, and that's okay. You can ask your stupid question. I want them to ask that because I want them to ask the question that they're worried is stupid, And then I always follow that up with that really in the vast majority of cases, it turns out they weren't stupid. And 3 other people in the room had the same question, but didn't dare to ask that because they thought it was stupid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's okay that there are stupid questions, and we should ask them because the world is that complex, and climate and the climate crisis and bringing about change are that difficult that we should ask them.
If we were all to focus on a single strategy, all of us within the climate and nature space, what would that be, do you think?
A single strategy.
Mm.
I'm going to say less jargon, no abbreviations. That's not a strategy, is it? Yeah, I'd say less jargon, being honest, being direct, focusing on key messages. Doing the strategic work. Yes. Okay. The strategy is to do the strategy, to not just jump in, to not feel overwhelmed by the urgency of it. It can feel so scary, right? When you read that annual report of, oh, we missed this, we're not on track anymore, we've passed the 1.5 degrees. Well, and if all of that is true, what are we going to do? We're still going to get up the next morning and continue our work, right? But it can feel really hard to not be overwhelmed by the urgency and therefore to skip steps. But actually, even though it feels counterintuitive, investing the time in strategic foundations and finding what really matters about the thing you're working on, whether that's climate tech or another climate area, that is really valuable. That will hold you in good stead for years, as I've seen with Synhelion, with Chempower, with many of our other clients. It holds you in good stead for so long because, well, of course, you're going to tweak the USPs. You've got more megawatt, you've got more plants, you've got more customers, whatever. But the foundation of your company hasn't changed. Even if you've pivoted space, that foundation hasn't changed. So that pays off.
Great. What a wonderful interview. It's been very exciting. What's the next thing you're going to do after this?
What is it? Right. I'm going to prepare my pre-pitching for next week. So with this stealth
Ooh.
startup that I mentioned, the news are going to come out in a week and a half.
Mm.
So we're currently pre-pitching to trade publications, to European business publications, to see who's going to do a larger feature. We'd love to win a print interview. So planning that out. We've started, and now it's the next wave of that for Monday.
Well, very good luck. Very good luck with
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time today.
It was
This
really
has
great to
been,
speak to you. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you.
and you as well. I mean, fascinating. You're the first person that we've talked to with that science perspective, and I think that's one of the more important and more difficult perspectives. So it's been quite a good learning experience, at least for me.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
this has been
Congratulations.
the Communicating Earth podcast. Thank you very much for listening.